absolutely. We need to do right by protecting animals from cruelty and from issues that we can be concerned about. But at the same time, we need to make sure we're protecting our farmers, our agricultural industries, and respecting that careful balance that has to go forward. And on that issue, there were many robust debates within our caucus, and we continue to be, as we've committed to. We're going to be moving forward with the Justice Minister looking at what we can do to continue to promote and protect animals in this country. It's something that getting that balance right means making sure we have our rural MPs on board, making sure that nobody feels overly attacked on this. And that's where open dialogue, regular consultation, and listening to everyone's points of views really works as a political process on this issue and on other issues. So I thank you for your passion and for bringing up that issue, and I encourage you to keep talking about issues that matter to you. Thank you. Next question. Yes, you, sir. Right here, your mic.
Evening, Mr. Prime Minister. Question actually just, you introed with it about veterans. I myself am a veteran who has received...
Thank you for your service.
My question is, as a veteran who's received a pension for PTSD, one of the things that is applied to me and is a concern to many people is, and actually talked about, I was actually at your, when you're running at your press conference at the Sports Center, is lifelong pensions. It was one of your promises to bring back lifelong pensions, switch it over from the one-time payout, and that would be something that actually would be a huge benefit to people like myself and many others who maybe are in this room. Is that something that you still intend to follow through with, or is that not?
No. It's something we absolutely still intend to follow through with. And, you know, thank you for coming here. Thank you for sharing your question and for speaking up for so many people who have similar questions. We took a number of immediate steps to fix some of the shortcomings and challenges that we inherited as a government, and that we got a very clear mandate from people to do better by our veterans, to do right by our veterans, and we've taken significant steps, but there is more to do. The lifelong benefits are part of it. The Minister of Veterans Affairs, Kent Hare, has just finished working with a broad panel of stakeholders, of veterans experts, of veterans groups, to talk about the gaps in the system, to talk about how we can better respond to the needs people have. And there's no question that the lifelong benefit continues to be something we're working on. We're year one of a 4-year mandate, but we are committed to getting that done. Thank you. Question from over here.
G'day, Justin.
Hello. What's your name?
Dan.
Hello, Dan.
Got to get my paper out here.
You got a few pages there. We're all worried.
Hours ago, Justin, I listened to you with other Canadians in Kingston. And at that time, you said that your federal government has a value of working relationship with the Canadian premiers. You stated that your working relationship with our premier, Kathleen Wynne, is a solid one. I'm a private sector small business owner. At this time, with many small business owners across Ontario, know that the Premier is out of touch with the largest employment sector. And that you state that you have a good working relationship with our Premier and all of Canadian premiers tells me that you are out of with private sector. I began my career as a stonemason at the age of 15 with my father, eventually taking over the company on his retirement in 1999. My wife and I did everything right. We registered our company, we paid our bills, and we support the province and the country. We purchased accident and illness insurance to cover us 24/7, to protect us and our company. We hired our crew, who we are proud of and worked with for 17 years. We struggle. We work hard to care for our crew and our company. We implement a benefit package to assist them with dental and prescription drugs, among other things. Our company, although small, employs 7, seemingly small, but as you think about it, the 7 employees raise their children on their wages. It is a great responsibility, and now more than ever, a struggle to accomplish. Neither our province or our federal government seems interested in the responsibility of the struggle of thousands of Canadians, instead implementing tax after tax on the backs of exhausted workers. For example, we now have to pay workman's compensation on myself. And the only way I can collect this if I get injured is if I lay off my whole entire crew and shut my business down while I recuperate. That doesn't make any sense. And a reluctant tax grab that does not cover me except for my 24/7, which I pay for myself. Private sector small business is easily and often unheard. We have no formal voice, no union that sways votes. My question to you, Prime Minister, is how is any private sector small business owner struggle to be heard? Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for your question, and thank you for your hard work. Obviously, the business you've built up is a source of pride, not just to you, but to everyone who works there, and it's a great Canadian success story, although it's ongoing, and I hear your struggles. First of all, on the provincial versus federal level, my job is to work constructively and collaboratively with people who other people elect. I'm going to do it internationally with the United States, and I'm going to do it across country with whoever premier sits around the table. And I think it's really important to recognize that in our confederation, it's important that we have good, constructive working relationships, and that's something that I have with every single premier, and I know some of you are thinking of some exceptions, but they're not. I have good working relationships with everyone, and that's, I think, part of what Canadians expect on me. In terms of supporting small businesses, in terms of supporting workers, in terms of helping grow the economy in ways that help you and your employees, that's at the heart of what we got elected for. We recognize that for all the previous government's supposed emphasis on economic growth, they had the worst record on growth of any government since R.B. Bennett in the depths of the Great Depression. We need to turn around growth in this country. And that's why we put forward a plan to grow the middle class, to support the middle class and those working hard to join it. And what we did concretely right off the bat was lower taxes on the middle class and raise them on the wealthiest 1%. We did that as of January 1st, 2016. And then this summer, you talked about your workers and their families, Dan. This summer we brought in a more generous Canada Child benefit that puts more money tax-free every month in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families. That's not helping families who are the wealthiest. It's helping the ones who need it. It's going to lift hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty across this country, reduce child poverty by 40%. So those are meaningful steps we've taken. But we also know we need to do more. We know that if we're going to keep our economy growing, we need good jobs. And that's part of why we made a commitment, unlike the other two parties, we made a commitment to invest in our country, to invest in infrastructure. We've put forward a plan on infrastructure investment to the tune of about $180 billion over the next 12 years. That's investments in public transit, it's investment in our roads and bridges, investments in social infrastructure, investments in green infrastructure, the kinds of things that are not just going to create good jobs in construction right now, and good jobs in design and architecture and planning, but good jobs in the long term as we create more capacity to succeed, more capacity to get our goods to markets, whether it's up and down the 401 or across the border. There are investments in research, in innovation, in betting on our future. These are the choices that we've made as a government to make sure that the investments we're making today are going to give opportunities for our kids and grandkids tomorrow and in decades to come. It is something that there is going to be a lot more work to do, and I appreciate your story and your concern, and I look forward to working with you and with everyone in this room and everyone across this country as we build greater opportunities for all Canadians, including and especially for small businesses that are the drivers of our economy. Thank you, Dan. Question from the back right there. Yes, you in the black shirt. No, sorry, right behind you, the woman. There we go. Sorry.
Hi. I don't believe that you have made your position publicly on the Site C Dam in northeastern British Columbia. Now, the Harper government lawyers have said in court that that project is likely not compatible with Canadian treaty rights, and yet the Harper government approved it anyways. I was wondering if your government is going to continue with the Harper legacy and approve that project, and if so, despite protests of First Nations, and if so, what does that indicate in terms of your commitment to constitutional rights, treaty rights, and rights under the UN Declaration of Indigenous Peoples?
Thank you very much for your question. Great question. The Site C Dam is, for those of you who don't know, is in the interior British Columbia, and it's a dam that was approved by the previous government in cooperation with the provincial government. The provincial government in BC has been a strong proponent of it, and we were faced with the decision of either withdrawing previous approval or continuing with it. British Columbia asked us and expected us not to overturn it. We looked at the broad range of challenges facing it. And on whole, we made the decision not to overturn the decision that the previous Canadian government took. We have committed moving forward to be a government that understands that we need to build a strong economy and protect the environment at the same time. There are parties out there, there are people out there who always want us to pick one or the other, but most Canadians I talk to understand that we need to create jobs and growth as we move forward in a way that is clean and protecting the environment. And the two things do need to go together. And that means sometimes we're going to take decisions that people will disagree with. And the Kinder Morgan pipeline decision is another decision that people often express concern with. Well, the fact is, anytime a government takes a big decision, there are going to be people in agreement and people against it, and we have to make what is the best decision for Canadians and for our country as we move forward. We're going to continue to make the right decisions, the decisions that we feel are the right ones, while at the same time we listen to the concerns that people raise. Now, the concerns you raise about respecting Indigenous rights and Indigenous peoples is extremely important to me. No relationship is more important to this government, and I've said it many times, than the relationship we have with Indigenous peoples. And that means working collaboratively and respecting and understanding the broad range of voices that come from Indigenous communities, where there are people in favor of certain projects and there are people against certain projects in Indigenous communities like in all communities. And our capacity to be thoughtful as we work things through, understand that we need to move towards more renewable energies, we need to make sure we're respecting Indigenous peoples and their concerns, make sure we're understanding the need to create jobs and economic growth that benefit us now and into the future, and getting all those competing interests right is at the heart of the challenges that we have as a government. And I am confident that we are doing the right kinds of things the right way, even though we'll never have unanimity on the way people look at it. Bringing together all these competing interests and figuring out how to build the right future for Canada that includes everyone, that creates opportunities for everyone, and that protects our natural ecosystems and environment for ourselves and for generations to come is what I'm focused on. Thank you for your concerns. Thank you for your question. Question in the middle, you ma'am in the red. Yep.
Thank you. Two big issues currently and going into the future for the entire globe are food security and clean water. And Canada is well positioned to provide both of those to the globe. And agriculture, Canadian agriculture, is instrumental in that whole equation. Every ministry and policy of every ministry impacts agriculture one way or another. And so two parts of that, I would like to hear your commitment. I know it, I'd like to hear it, to supporting the agricultural industry with the programs and the plans that we need. But most importantly, I would like to hear if you have any system in place that looks at policy from all ministries to look for unintended negative consequences to agriculture.
Thank you. First of all, one of the things that we are very much shifting within the way the federal government works is we're trying to reduce the silos that happen. It's so often that one department doesn't pay much attention to its impacts or the effects on another department on a different area. And one of the things we're able to do by bringing together the cabinet the way we do to engage in such a broad range of discussions as we have is be a lot more alert to the concerns of unintended consequences from various decisions. On top of that, you can be assured that with strong voices like Neil's, like MPs like Mike Bossio or David Graham or Minister Lawrence Macaulay, focused very much on the needs of farmers, the needs of our agricultural industry, our producers across this country, making sure that we are preparing ourselves for both the innovations that are going to sometimes be disruptive, but also the opportunities that we have to lead the world. When we look at the potential impact of the Canada-Europe Free Trade Agreement that we've signed, the access to a market of 500 million people, there are great opportunities for Canadian produce, for Canadian products. When we look at the interest in China, the growing middle class in China of 400 million people who are looking to quality products from anywhere around the world they can get them, whether it's cherries from the Okanagan or produce from right across the country or lobsters from the East Coast. There is a real desire for the kind of quality products that Canada can put forward. There is a tremendous global market out there for Canadian quality in terms of agriculture, and I'm very excited about the kind of innovation and the kind of engagement that we have as a way of supporting our agricultural industry. On top of that, the Liberal Party is not a party that will ever take farmers' votes for granted. That's a bit of a joke. We know we can't take rural areas for granted, and we're in no danger of it. We need to work very, very hard to demonstrate that we are extremely concerned with and focused on the needs of Canadian farmers, the opportunities for innovation, for research, for developments that are going to improve our capacities to succeed, and the essential element of how we make sure that family farms are successful, that we can pass them on from one generation to another, that young people pick and choose a career in agriculture as a positive thing. We're losing too many of our young people in rural areas who think their only future is in cities, and we need to turn that around right across the country. These are all things that we're very much committed to, very much working on, and I thank you very much for your question. Merci. Question in the back. You in the red shirt, sir. Or ma'am. I can't quite see. Ma'am, there we are.
Sorry for my pronunciation. English is not my first language. Thank you for coming, and I'm very grateful to talk to you in person. I'm Geneva, a new immigrant married to a military member. This is my question. Would you be able to go back to the old waiting system to be a Canadian citizen, which was 3 years instead of 4? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Canada's strength has always been that we've understood that this country was made what it was by people coming here seeking a better life. The first settlers were greeted by Indigenous Canadians who helped them figure out how to get through the winters that are too long and the spaces that are too big. And successive generations of people coming to this country have come here willing to work hard to build a better future for themselves and their family, and in so doing have created this extraordinarily successful country that we all enjoy and are so proud of today. There are pressures around the world right now that because of the worries that people feel about their own future, their kids' future, it becomes easy to want to close off from the world, to point fingers, to lay blame for challenges we're facing, instead of understanding that drawing in people from around the world is an essential part of creating our success in the past and will be again in the future. Canadians are rightly proud of our immigration system, but at the same time, we recognize that there are tremendous challenges. We need to do a better job of welcoming people, of empowering them to succeed. We need to do a better job of integrating them. We need to do a better job pulling in international students and getting them to stay. We need a better job creating a path to citizenship for temporary workers. There is a broad range of things we can do, and one of the commitments that we made a year ago when we formed government was to reform and improve our immigration system. Over the past year, the immigration minister we had, John McCallum, has done an extraordinary job, both bringing in almost 35,000 Syrian refugees. He didn't do it on his own. We as a government didn't do it on his own. We were able to do that because Canadians in communities across this country, including right here in Bay of Quinte, stepped up and wanted to be part of it. Municipalities, provinces, it became a national project that we showed the world how we can be open and generous and understand the strength that it brings at a time where the narrative isn't so positive elsewhere around the world. Our new immigration minister, a Somali refugee named Ahmed Hussein, is going to be making important improvements, continuing the work that we've done over the past year on improving our immigration system. We're looking at, indeed, changing the timelines, making it better, making it easier to come in, while at the same time ensuring that we're supporting people once they come in. It continues to be something we're working on, and I thank you very much for bringing it up. We'll go for a question here, and then I'm going to take a question from behind me as well. So, you, man.
Hi. So recently, there's been problems in our community with mental health, and as a teenage, still attending high school, there's not much opportunity for help around this community. So my question is there going to be more mental health for teenage and youth around the country?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you for, and I hate having to say this, but thank you for your courage in standing up and asking that question as well. And I hate having to say it because there still is stigmas around mental health, particularly amongst young people. When we know at the same time that the vast majority of people who struggle with mental illness throughout their lives, could be diagnosed before they turn 25, show their first challenges when they are young people. And we need to do a much better job of giving specifically our young people the help and support they need to be able to make it through what is, for everyone, an extremely challenging point of your life, going through your teenage years. But when on top of that, you're facing mental health challenges, or people in your family are, it lays on a level of heaviness that sometimes can make you feel all alone and unsupported. We know that addressing mental health is hugely important for families, for individuals, for our schools, but it's also really important for our economy. It is something that when we can help support people through difficult times and get them back to work and help them be productive and contributing the way they want to be, we all end up better. So it's high time that Canada had a proper level of engagement in addressing mental health issues. And this is something that I am in full agreement with our extraordinary Minister of Health, Jane Philpott. You know, quite frankly, if I wasn't an advocate for mental health, I wouldn't be my mother's son, and I'm proud to be my mother's son in everything she does. And that's why when we sat down with the provinces before Christmas to talk about investments in healthcare, one of the things we did was we put billions of dollars on the table directly earmarked towards dealing with mental health, because Canada is overdue in addressing mental health. I tell you that we need to do more. We know that. But having people talk about it, having people share their struggles, having people be strong about demanding more support, asking for help, is part of the way we're going to get it done. Thank you very much for that. Okay, question from here behind. Go ahead. Here we go. There's a mic for you. Yeah, it's on.
Hello? Okay. So majority of Canadians have access to adequate drug coverage. However, there's still a minority that doesn't, and that makes them vulnerable. How do you plan on changing that?
Pharmacare costs, prescription medication costs are far too high, and it unfortunately tends to hit most vulnerable communities harder, whether it's our seniors who are already struggling with expenses, whether it's vulnerable communities, marginalized communities. We know we have to do a better job of bringing down prescription drug costs. That's why our government, and again, Jane Philpott, and thank you for the shout out and support for how extraordinary Jane is working with the provinces, working in significant and meaningful ways to create a pan-Canadian strategy that will drive down the cost of prescription drugs. There's a number of steps we can take along that way that will eventually, one hopes, end up at pharmacare, but immediately there's a lot of things that we can and are working on doing so that people have more reasonable access to the drugs they need and don't have to make impossible choices between eating and staying healthy, or between their rent and their medications, which unfortunately far too many people are still struggling with. Thank you. A question from the center. We'll go back from the back corner there. You're right there. Go ahead.
Oh, hello. I'm from Sterling, so 20 minutes north. And unfortunately for us, we just had the worst drought on record, causing a lot of people's wells to go dry, obviously, and lots of issues for the agricultural areas as well. So basically, in the face of these challenges, we know that this is kind of being affected by climate change, and we know that fossil fuels fuel climate change. So my question is, how is it ethical for Canada and the future of Canadians to be investing in the oil industry as opposed to divesting and moving? And I know you are putting money into the green sector, but it seems like we could be making the transition a little bit faster. Not saying turn off the taps, but just move that way.
Absolutely. Great question. First of all, and I know it was sort of part of the preamble, but there is something really important that we have to understand. Governments need to support our agricultural industry through tough times and through good times. If we're not there to support our farmers and agricultural industry while they're going through difficult years, it's not like we can suddenly, turn around in the good years and hope that everyone will come back to the land. We need to make sure that farmers can know that they're going to be able to feed their families and take care of themselves and their future year in, year out, because we need them to be there for us as a country, as a society, year in and year out. So we need to do a better job of responding to the cyclical ups and downs, the natural ups and downs that will happen in agriculture. Compounding that, and making those challenges even more difficult are the uncertainties and the extreme weather events that are going to be coming with climate change. We need to do our part in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions that Canada puts out, but we also need to demonstrate the kind of leadership that is going to help the world figure out their challenges, because Canada is a small percentage of global emissions, but the role that we can play in developing solutions, in pushing for solutions, is far larger than the small contributions we make. And that's where meaningful leadership that demonstrates that we understand that growing the economy, creating the jobs of tomorrow, creating the technological solutions to reduce pollution, to increase efficiencies, to get off of fossil fuels and onto renewables, is something Canada absolutely does need to push at. And that's why I'm so proud that we've put forward a national price on carbon pollution that every single province is going to have to take on, and that will allow us to move towards those Paris climate commitments that we've made. We will reduce our emissions. We will bend the curve that was increasing climate emissions every year towards actually decreasing them. And that is something that, while we do, we will show to the world that we're doing. Now, a lot of people, and I think it was part of your question, say, well, if you're doing that, if you're serious about tackling climate change, how come you're still building pipelines? Which is a totally legitimate question. The fact is that the reason we are able to put a national price on carbon is that, among others, Alberta's government, Rachel Notley's NDP government, has shown real leadership on climate change, not just putting a price on carbon, but putting an absolute cap on oil sands emissions. That means no matter what we do, no matter what pipelines we build, no matter how much they're developed, the emissions from the pipeline, from the oil sands will cease, will stop at 100 megatons. What we have to focus on now is how are we making that transition off fossil fuels in a responsible and thoughtful way. Families across Alberta and indeed across Canada are struggling right now because of the economic downturn, because of the low price of oil that is really causing extreme pressure and extreme challenges on a lot of people. We need to make sure that we're continuing to support the families who need it while we create this transition. And if we don't build pipelines, we will continue to export oil by rail. Right now, if you look at the graph and the numbers of rail cars with oil on them over the past few years, it's astonishing how quickly that has increased. The fact is, we know that transporting oil on rail cars is more expensive, more polluting, and much more dangerous for Canadians and their communities. So what we need to focus on is getting our resources to new markets safely, being able to support families while we go through this transition, but keep our minds focused on the transition we have to make off of fossil fuels. And as we do that, as we lead the way on that around the world, as we show that even a country that is an energy producer and that has, a need for air conditioning in the summer and heating in the winter, we can reduce our energy dependence and we can lead the way in the world. That's what Canadians can do. That's the example that we can show to the world. And regardless of what our neighbors to the south may be trying to do in the coming years, we know that we're not going to be able to stop climate change. It's a reality. It's a fact. The question is always, how are we going to deal with it? How are we going to create the solutions that the world needs? And that's exactly what I'm focused on as we move through this transition. Thank you very much for your question. Question over here. You, sir, in the front.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming to our part of the world, and welcome back.
Thank you.
My question is going to be about electoral reform. So I'll let you start to prepare your mind on that subject. This is a question that is very dear to my heart. First of all, for historical purposes, I voted for your father twice.
Yeah, but he ran 4 or 5 times.
Yes, I know. I know. Remember, I said twice. So something happened between then and now. But I am prepared to watch you as you take on the legacy of your father, if legacy is the right word. In any case, I have 2 parts to my question, but a little preamble beforehand. Electoral reform and the electoral process is fundamental to our democracy. We, those of us at my age or older, have been voting for our governments the same way forever and ever. And you had indicated that a change was necessary. I do not disagree with that. What I find at issue is 2 things. You will need the legal authority and the political authority to accomplish this. The last time a government sought the legal authority was when the Liberal Party insisted reforming the Senate be submitted to the Supreme Court. That caused the end of that discussion because of the formula required to accomplish Senate reform.
Except I went and reformed the Senate.
Yes, yes, in your own way. But the major discussion was, should the Senate be elected? And that government, led by Mr. Harper, submitted the question to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yes, if you have the number of provinces and the number of percentage of the population to accomplish that. So, seeking the legal authority would be one of my questions. And the second is whether electoral reform, whatever process that might be, as you have determined there is options to be had. Those 2 questions, I believe, are necessary. If you make a decision as to which of the options should be chosen, we the people, you know where I'm going, we the people should be given the opportunity to express ourselves in the way of a referendum or some other option. That is the only way that this bedrock of our democracy will succeed if we are choosing how our MPs and our subsequent government is chosen. The question about the legal authority, you know, I believe, so therefore my 2 questions are, will you submit when the time is right for you, because I understand there's a bit of a waffle on that at the moment, will you submit any electoral reform to the Supreme Court in advance of bringing that decision to the people in the way of a referendum? Thank you.
Okay. Electoral reform is an issue upon which there are very many very strongly held positions in any given room right across the country. We know that people voted overwhelmingly for parties, including my own, committed to electoral reform, and we are moving forward on that. We put together a number of different ways for Canadians to be heard. Town halls were held right across the country where Canadians got to weigh in on their concerns and their questions and their preferences around electoral reform. We put together a committee of parliamentarians in which the Liberal Party did not have the control or the majority to make recommendations, to study the question, to listen to experts. And on top of that, we, and you still have a few more days if you haven't done it already, are encouraging people to check out mydemocracy.ca, which asks a broad range of questions about the kinds of governance you want. Do you think diversity should be within a political party or across political parties in the House? Do you think that you should have a second choice on your ballot? Do you think that it's important to give voices to minority groups in Parliament? Do you think that, a broad range of questions that ask how important do you think it is that you have stability in terms of one party governing, or how important is it that governments be formed by compromises between different political parties? These are all fundamental questions that don't go directly to which model people might want, but talks about the flavor and the values that underpin what we see as important in our democracy. And that's why we've done a number of different things around allowing Canadians to weigh in on this. We are now listening, reflecting. We have a brand new Minister of Democratic Institutions who's going to tackle this with energy and gusto in terms of how we're going to move forward on this file that is so important to Canadians. But I hear you very clearly, sir, that we need to make sure that any change which is transformational and fundamental in our government and in our democracy has both the legal and the political support to move through. And there are a number of different ways we can look at doing that. And trust me, we are reflecting on all sorts of different avenues as we move forward. This is something that matters, and it matters not just for now, but it matters for decades to come, because we know that changing an electoral system isn't easy and won't happen often. We need to get it right if we do, and that's and when we do, and that's what we're very much focused on. So thank you for your passion, sir. Question in the back. Yes, you young man. Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Trudeau. Welcome to Belleville.
Thanks.
We're happy to have you. So my question is, with the U.S. presidential inauguration coming up very quickly, how is the Donald Trump presidency going to affect Canadian-American relations?
Everyone leans in close to listen to my answer right now. Obviously, it's something we're all very much alert to and aware of. Canada is a country that has benefited tremendously from trade, specifically from trade with the United States. Our economies are interwoven, interdependent. Canada is the #1 export destination for 35 different American states. And this is something that we have emphasized already a number of times to the incoming administration. We know that any change in administration brings fresh challenges and new opportunities, and that's something that we are being very, very thoughtful about. Canadians expect their government to have a constructive working relationship with the incoming administration, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that we are fighting for Canadian jobs, for Canadian economic growth, for opportunities for Canadians as it regards both our relations with the United States and indeed with the world. At the same time, Canada is a separate country from the United States, and there are things that we hold dear that the Americans haven't prioritized. And I'm never going to shy away from standing up for what I believe in, whether it's proclaiming loudly to the world that I am a feminist, whether it's understanding that immigration is a source of strength for us, and Muslim Canadians are an essential part of the success of our country today and into the future. But these are issues that are things that we can have discussions on and respectful disagreements on with our neighbors to the south, if indeed we have to have disagreements on them. But every step of the way, our focus is on making sure that Canadian businesses, Canadians and their families have good jobs, have economic growth, have opportunities. And that is the lens with which I dealt with the possibility of this American election throughout. I refrained from commenting on either of the candidates for the American presidency because I knew I would have to work with one of them, and I wasn't sure which one I would have to work with. No one was. And now that they've elected President-elect Trump, we will work with him. in a thoughtful and constructive way. We will make sure that he knows the extent to which our economies are intertwined, and there are good jobs and benefits to the middle class on both sides of the border when we get along well. That is what Canadians expect me to do, and that's what I'm going to stay focused on in the coming weeks, months, and years. Thank you for your question. Someone from the very back there. You, sir, in the white beard, waving the hat. Yes. He has an ascot. I got to get it to him.
Well, thank you very much. I'm a green inventor. In fact, I asked Neil to pass along one of the products that I make, which is a garden hose. And I'm almost brave enough to ask how many people in the room have garden hoses. I think just about everybody. And I hope that you, Prime Minister, get the sample I sent to you, because it's a very important environmental issue. Garden hoses, in general, if anybody wants to Google them, create a lot of pollution. My hose is the only one that the Hastings Prince Edward County Health Unit recommends it's actually safe to drink from. But to carry that further, you have to think it's not only human and animal contact, but where's the water going? And as an environmentalist, what I'm pointing out is that the water's going to the water table, streams and creeks, and it eventually comes back. We're drinking water that the dinosaurs drank. So water being such a critical part of life on the planet, it's really key that we look after that. So my question is, at your last environmental hearing, I put forward that the government needs to regulate all garden hoses, that they're not made out of inexpensive PVC, which is very nasty chemicals, but that it be made out of potable water ingredients like the plumbing is. And I think the only way to make that happen quickly, to stop the amount of contamination that's going on, is with the government standing up and saying, when it comes to water, you have to have potable materials in order to transport it. And I'm wondering, my question is, can the government do that quickly?
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughtfulness, your leadership, and indeed, bringing forward an issue that I have to admit I hadn't really thought of before. But that's quite frankly one of the great benefits of doing these open town halls, where we invariably end up learning all sorts of things. I remember vividly the hue and cry that was raised in my household around water bottles when the concerns were first raised about the contents of the plastic leaching into your water bottles, and are you giving glass bottles to your kids or steel bottles, or are they BPA-free plastic bottles? I think this is an issue that consumers are more and more thoughtful about, and I certainly look forward to seeing how this issue evolves, and I promise you I will ask the relevant departments in my government to see where we are on potable water materials within outdoor plumbing fixtures, including garden hoses. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, you in the front. Yeah. Yep. Right there.
Thank you so much for coming here. I think it's so cool that this is what you're doing. You're connecting with us personally, and on my way in, I sat beside some ladies who welcomed me, and this guy back there, the seat cushion guy, you can put your hand up, he offered me a seat cushion because I'm short. And these ladies heard my story very briefly, just in passing, and they had the heart to put their own hands up so that I would have an opportunity for the question. That's Canada, that's love. I'm so happy for them. My name's Jamie. I used to have the opportunity to wrestle for Canada. And I was on my way to Olympics, went to the dentist, got 12 mercury fillings at once when I was 20 as the fittest guy in the men's national wrestling team. And within 3 years, despite being ranked first at Olympic trials, I couldn't train anymore. Arthritis throughout my body. I've lost like 25 pounds. I didn't know what was going on for years. Finally found out. So mercury poisoning. And so I'm working through that, and it's pretty tough. So that kind of was like an underlying distrust in the system that I had. Okay. Now, I grew up in St. Catharines. I went to St. Catharines Collegiate, and I went there at the same time as someone named Amanda Carodi. Does that name kind of ring a bell? Okay, so she was in the BC terror trial thing, and it turned out that it was judged to be entrapment, and she was considered a terrorist and sentenced to life in prison, and then Bill C-51 passed, and then it got overturned, but Bill C-51 is still there, and I know that you have a heart to get rid of it, and I'm really happy for that. For people here who don't know, just in a nutshell, what Bill C-51 is, basically anyone who claims to be, or who is said to be a domestic dissident or could be considered a terrorist or anything like that. The last government passed this bill where you lose a ton of rights, and they could come in your house without a warrant. They can arrest you for a year, house arrest with no trial. They can house arrest you for 5 years still, though. And you get a GPS anklet tracker. This is all just on hearsay that you might be a terrorist or you might be against the government in a bad way or anything like that. So, yeah, it's pretty scary. You get all your electronic communications taken away, potentially, and actually taken over. The RCMP can post in your name to your friends and stuff like that. Okay, so you decided that's bad news, that's not good. And thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for having a heart to make amends for that. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. So my own personal kind of trouble with the system where I used to be in the military for 10 years, by the way, before I got the mercury poisoning, dropped off the national team, ranked first at Olympic trials. All that happened to me, and it left me a bit of a distrust in the system. And then this girl that I went to high school with, she faced life in prison for false accusation of being a terrorist. And then Bill C-51 passes. While her trial is overturned, that's great. I kind of have a lack of trust in anything while Bill C-51 is still lingering. And so my question for you is, you're making amendments, and would you be scared if the amendments are still like a quarter as scary as the bill is now, even if they're just a quarter as scary, you personally, kind of like a yes or no thing, would you personally feel safe protesting and speaking out against it publicly or even privately, because it can be recorded? Would you feel safe speaking out against something like that? Because I want to be able to feel safe and speak out against something like that, you know? And just from heart to heart, sincerely. That's my question for you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your story. On Bill C-51 and on safety and security in general, the position that we took, the position that I took and talked about repeatedly during the campaign, is that there shouldn't be an incompatibility between the two things that Canadians expect. Canadians expect their governments to keep them safe, and Canadians expect their governments to respect our rights. And those two things, you shouldn't have to pick one or the other. We need to keep our country, our communities, our individuals safe, and we need to safeguard our rights and freedoms. And a key part of that is getting the balance right. Now, we understand that the world is changing, that access to encryption technologies and frame the situation, you need to have mechanisms on oversight. And that's why we've created a committee of parliamentarians. We're in the process of creating a committee of parliamentarians who will be people from all different parties, empowered to look and see everything our intelligence agencies, our police agencies are doing in the name of keeping us safe. And that actually has two goals to it. One is to make sure that they're respecting our laws, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the principles that we value as a free and open society. And the other is to make sure that our institutions and agencies are indeed doing everything possible to keep us safe and getting that balance right. And that's where having your elected representatives, parliamentarians, empowered to look at everything that's done and hold any government to account is something that will hopefully restore your trust and our trust in the system. As to my own personal willingness to stand up for things that I see as just or unjust, I stood on stage in a debate during the election campaign in which I argued that a Canadian citizen convicted of terrorist acts should get to keep their Canadian citizenship. I mean, that was the dynamic we were in right there, where the Conservative government had put forward a law which, on the face of it, everyone should agree with. Wow, if you get convicted of a terrorist offense against Canada, you should forfeit the right to be Canadian. It seems very obvious. Except, sir, that if you are a 10th generation Canadian, like I happen to be, more or less, no government can take away your citizenship because it's the only citizenship I have. So we, in fact, make citizenship conditional only for people who became Canadians or whose parents were born in a different country. And what that does is create two tiers of citizenship. And that's an example of where the rhetoric and the fear-mongering that we can get in can lead to consequences that go far beyond what we'd think of on the surface of things. It is part of our identity as a country that if you are a Canadian, full stop, whether you had the honor of choosing to become a Canadian or whether you were born into it. And that's something that makes us more successful at recognizing diversity as a source of strength than any other country in the world. And it's something that is going to require us to make sometimes bold and difficult decisions. To do something like standing up and saying, actually, no, I don't think. Be able to be worthy of the